Shut up.
The shout exploded through the quiet evening air of Rosewood Diner like a gunshot, shattering conversations and clinking silverware into stunned silence. Every head in the packed restaurant turned toward the source, where Dylan Pierce, son of the town's wealthiest family, stood pointing an accusatory finger at an 18-year-old girl sitting alone in the corner booth. Madison Taylor, a scholarship student from the wrong side of town, had been quietly eating a $5 sandwich and reading a textbook when the attack began. But what Dylan didn't know was that in 15 minutes, he would discover he had chosen the wrong target, because those calm eyes staring back at him didn't belong to a helpless victim, but to the daughter of the most powerful woman in America's national security apparatus. The diner fell into that particular kind of silence that follows unexpected violence, where even the coffee machine seemed to hold its breath. Madison's fork remained suspended halfway to her mouth, a piece of turkey and lettuce trembling slightly on the tines. Her biology textbook lay open to Chapter 12, Predator-Prey Relationships, which would prove more relevant than anyone could imagine. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, I want to take a moment to thank you for being here. Stories like Madison's need to be told, and your support makes that possible. If this tale of hidden strength and unexpected justice resonates with you, please consider hitting that like button. Your engagement helps us share these powerful narratives with people who need to hear that appearances can be deceiving, and that sometimes the quietest person in the room is actually the most dangerous. Dylan Pierce cut an imposing figure at 6 feet 2 inches, his designer clothes and perfectly styled hair broadcasting privilege from across the room. At 19, he carried himself with the swagger of someone who had never faced real consequences, his blue eyes holding the particular cruelty that money often protects. Behind him stood his constant companion, Brad Thompson, already pulling out his phone with the practiced ease of someone who turned other people's humiliation into social media content. "I said shut up," Dylan repeated, though Madison hadn't spoken a word. The contradiction seemed lost on him as he advanced toward her table, his expensive sneakers squeaking against the checkered linoleum floor. "You think you're better than everyone else, sitting there with your books, acting all superior." Madison slowly set down her fork, her movements deliberate and controlled. She had learned long ago that sudden motions could escalate situations beyond repair. Her left hand remained flat on the table, but her right hand shifted almost imperceptibly, adjusting the angle of her phone so its camera captured a clear view of the approaching threat. The movement was so subtle that only someone trained to notice such things would have caught it. I'm sorry," Madison said quietly, her voice carrying just enough volume to reach the recording device. "I think there's been some misunderstanding. I was just studying." "Misunderstanding?" Dylan's laugh was sharp and ugly. "The misunderstanding is you thinking you belong in the same space as real people. You're what? Scholarship trash? A charity case taking up space that should go to someone who actually matters?" The words hung in the air like smoke, toxic and spreading. Around the diner, conversations had stopped entirely. Mrs. Patterson, the owner who had known Madison since she was 8 years old, stood frozen behind the counter, her weathered hands gripping a coffee pot so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She knew she should intervene, but the Pierce family had enough influence to shut down her business with a phone call. Madison's breathing remained steady, though something flickered behind her eyes. She glanced at her watch, a simple digital model that looked cheap compared to Dylan's gold Rolex. The time read 7:45 p.m., and she made a mental note with the precision of someone accustomed to tracking events by the minute. "You know what your problem is?" Dylan continued, emboldened by the audience and Madison's apparent passivity. "Poor people like you need to learn gratitude. When people like my family let you into our spaces, you should say, 'Thank you,' not sit there pretending you're as good as us." Brad had his phone aimed at Madison now, recording with the gleeful expression of someone who believed they were about to capture viral content. "This is going to be epic," he whispered, not quite quietly enough. "Wait until everyone at school sees this." Madison's left hand moved to her textbook, closing it with a soft thud. For the first time since the confrontation began, she looked directly at Dylan, and something in her gaze made him take an involuntary step backward. It wasn't fear or submission he saw there, but a calculating intelligence that seemed to be measuring him for something. "Dylan Pierce," she said, her voice still soft, but now carrying an edge that cut through the diner's atmosphere. "Your father is Mayor Richard Pierce, correct? The one who oversees municipal contracts and has those frequent international business trips?" The specificity of the question caught Dylan off guard. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Just making sure I have the right family," Madison replied, her tone conversational. "When someone makes allegations about my character in a public space, I like to be precise about who's making them." Something about her phrasing, the way she said allegations instead of insults, sent a small shiver of unease through Dylan, but his pride and the presence of his audience overrode any instinct for caution. "Allegations?" He stepped closer, now looming over her table. "I'm not alleging anything. I'm stating facts. You're poor, you don't belong here, and you need to remember your place." Madison reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device that looked like a standard recording app, but the interface was unlike anything available to civilians. The screen showed encrypted timestamps and multiple audio channels, technology that spoke of serious institutional backing. She tapped it once, and a small red light began blinking. "Please continue," she said politely. "I want to make sure I have a complete record of this interaction." Dylan's confidence wavered slightly. "You can't record me without permission." "Actually," Madison replied, consulting what appeared to be notes on her phone, but was actually a legal reference app. "In this state, single-party consent laws mean I can record any conversation I'm part of. Since you initiated contact with me in a public space, this recording is completely legal and admissible." The casual way she mentioned admissibility sent another ripple of unease through the watching crowd. Normal teenagers didn't talk about evidence and legal proceedings with such familiarity. When Madison discreetly activated the recording application on her phone, we see the critical importance of protecting digital evidence. Professional recording applications with encrypted timestamps can be the difference between justice and injustice, providing unalterable proof of events that might otherwise become he said, she said situations. These specialized evidence protection tools ensure that truth can't be disputed or tampered with. Brad lowered his phone slightly, suddenly unsure whether filming was still a good idea. "Dylan, maybe we should just—" "Shut up, Brad," Dylan snapped, his embarrassment at being questioned by someone he considered beneath him overriding his judgment. "I'm not done with Miss Scholarship here." He reached across the table and knocked Madison's water glass over, sending ice and liquid cascading across her textbook and notes. The gesture was petty and cruel, designed to humiliate her by destroying her property while making her clean up the mess. Madison didn't flinch as the water soaked through her papers. Instead, she calmly moved her phone to safety and watched Dylan with the same calculating expression. "That's destruction of property," she observed, as if commenting on the weather. "Added to verbal harassment and intimidation, we're starting to build quite a comprehensive case." "A case?" Dylan's voice climbed higher. "What are you, some kind of lawyer now? You're 18 years old and poor. You don't have lawyers." Madison tilted her head slightly, studying him with renewed interest. "It's fascinating that you assume someone's financial status determines their access to legal representation. Tell me, Dylan, Do you know much about federal oversight of local government operations? The question seemed to come from nowhere, its relevance unclear to everyone except Madison herself. Dylan's face flushed red with confusion and mounting anger. What kind of weird question is that? Are you trying to be smart with me? I'm just curious about your family's civic engagement, Madison replied smoothly. Your father's international business relationships must create interesting opportunities for federal agencies to ensure compliance with various regulations. Something about the way she phrased federal agencies made Dylan's stomach tighten, though he couldn't pinpoint why. The words carried implications he didn't fully understand, but instinctively feared. Mrs. Patterson finally found her courage and approached their table, her face pale but determined. Dylan, honey, why don't you and Brad order something to eat? I'm sure Madison here doesn't want any trouble. The trouble, Dylan said, his voice getting louder again, is people like her thinking they can sit in places like this and act like they belong. My family has been supporting this diner for 20 years. Our money keeps the lights on, and she's what, contributing $5 for a sandwich? Madison checked her watch again. 7:51 p.m. She seemed to be timing something, though what remained unclear to the increasingly nervous onlookers. Dylan, she said, her voice still calm but now carrying a hint of something that might have been pity. You're about to make a very expensive mistake. I'm going to give you one opportunity to walk away from this situation with your dignity intact. The offer enraged him. My dignity? You're threatening me? You're nothing. My father could have you banned from every business in this town. He could make sure your scholarship gets revoked. He could destroy your entire future with a phone call. Madison nodded thoughtfully, as if considering his words. Then she reached into her wallet and pulled out what looked like a student ID, but the format was unlike anything from a local school. The card was holographic, with security features that spoke of serious institutional authority. That's interesting, she said, setting the card on the wet table where it caught the diner's fluorescent lights, in a way that revealed additional embedded technology. I wonder how that would work exactly. Dylan glanced at the card, and something about its official appearance made him even more agitated. What is that supposed to be? Some kind of fake government ID? You think you can intimidate me with costume jewelry? I think, Madison said, standing up for the first time since the confrontation began, that you should be very careful about your next actions, because unlike you, I actually understand the consequences of what's happening here. She moved with a fluid grace that seemed out of place for someone who was supposedly cowering from intimidation. As she rose, she shifted her stance in a way that placed her back to the wall and gave her clear sightlines to all entrances. The positioning was subtle, but unmistakably tactical. Dylan, interpreting her standing as either submission or preparation to flee, stepped even closer. Consequences? The only consequences here are what happen to people who don't know their place. Brad, make sure you're getting all of this. I want everyone to see what happens when scholarship trash tries to act tough. Brad raised his phone again, but his hands were shaking slightly. Something about Madison's demeanor had shifted in a way that made him deeply uncomfortable, though he couldn't articulate why. Madison pulled out her phone and placed what appeared to be a normal call, but the words she spoke were anything but ordinary. Package confirmed, she said quietly into the device. Location secured. Timeline nominal. The phrases meant nothing to Dylan, but they sent a chill through anyone who might have recognized military or law enforcement terminology. Madison wasn't talking to a friend or family member. She was reporting to someone with official authority. Who are you calling? Dylan demanded, reaching out to grab her phone. Give me that. Madison moved with surprising speed. not retreating, but simply redirecting his reaching hand with a gentle but firm motion that left him grasping air. The movement was so smooth and practiced that it looked almost accidental, but the result was unmistakable. Dylan had tried to take something from her and failed completely. "I wouldn't recommend trying that again," Madison said, her voice still soft, but now carrying an undertone of steel. "Physical contact without consent is assault, and we now have multiple witnesses." Dylan's face went purple with rage and embarrassment. The girl he'd been trying to humiliate had just made him look foolish in front of everyone, and worse, she'd done it without raising her voice or losing her composure. "You think you're so smart," he snarled, his hands clenching into fists. "Let's see how smart you are when my father hears about this. When he's done with you, you'll be lucky if you can get a job cleaning toilets." Madison consulted her phone, checking something that looked like a timer or countdown. "Your father," she said thoughtfully, "might be too busy with his own problems to worry about mine very soon." The comment hit Dylan like a physical blow. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Federal investigations can be very time-consuming," Madison replied, her tone conversational, "especially when they involve financial irregularities and potential foreign interference in local government operations." Dylan's blood ran cold. Those weren't random accusations or lucky guesses. They were specific enough to suggest actual knowledge of his family's business dealings, the kind of knowledge that only someone with serious connections would possess. "You're lying," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You don't know anything about my family." "I know that your father's Swiss bank account received 3 wire transfers from Eastern European shell companies in the past 6 months, Madison said casually, as if discussing the weather. "I know about the consulting fees from organizations that don't actually seem to exist. And I know that certain federal agencies have been very interested in the voting patterns on municipal contracts that benefit those same mysterious benefactors." The diner had gone completely silent. Even the kitchen staff had stopped moving, sensing that something far beyond a typical teenage confrontation was unfolding. Dylan's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The information Madison had just recited was not only accurate, but specific enough that she couldn't have guessed it. Someone had given her access to details that should have been known only to law enforcement agencies conducting serious financial investigations. "How do you—" he began, then stopped, realizing that finishing the question would be tantamount to confirming the allegations. Madison smiled for the first time since the confrontation began, and it was not a pleasant expression. "I think the better question is why you thought attacking a random stranger in a public place was a good idea. Did it ever occur to you to wonder whether that stranger might not be as random as you assumed?" The blood drained from Dylan's face as the implications of Madison's words sank in. She hadn't just guessed at his family's corruption. She had cited specific financial transactions that should have been impossible for a teenage girl to access. His hands began to tremble as he realized he might have stumbled into something far more dangerous than a simple bullying incident. "You're bluffing," he whispered, but even he didn't believe it anymore. "There's no way you could know those things." Madison checked her watch again. 7:57 p.m. Whatever she was waiting for was getting close. "Dylan, I'm going to ask you one more time to walk away. In approximately 3 minutes, this situation is going to escalate beyond anything you're prepared to handle." But Dylan's fear was rapidly transforming into desperate rage. The idea that this scholarship girl, this nobody, could threaten his family's empire was unbearable. He lunged forward, grabbing Madison's phone from her hand and hurling it across the diner, where it shattered against the far wall. "There!" he shouted, his voice cracking with hysteria. Let's see you make your mysterious phone calls now." Madison looked at the broken phone with mild interest, then pulled a second device from her jacket pocket. This one was clearly military grade, with a reinforced case and antenna configuration that spoke of serious government funding. The sight of it made Dylan's stomach drop. "Protocol 7 confirmed." Madison spoke into the device, her voice now carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to giving reports under pressure. "Subject has escalated to destruction of property and appears increasingly unstable. Recommend immediate intervention." As the situation intensifies, Madison utilizes a specialized encrypted communication platform to connect with her complex network. These secure communication systems ensure that vital information is transmitted with absolute security, impossible to hack or trace by unauthorized parties. Such emergency response coordination tools are essential when dealing with high-stakes situations requiring federal-level intervention. The response from the device was immediate and chilling. A woman's voice, calm but clearly in command, crackled through the speaker. "Understood. Subject 7. Containment team is 90 seconds out. Maintain position and document everything." Dylan's world began to spin. Subject 7 wasn't Madison's name. It was her designation. The realization that he had been systematically provoking someone who was clearly part of a larger operation made his knees weak. "Who are you?" he demanded, his bravado completely evaporated. "What kind of game is this?" "No game," Madison replied, her entire demeanor now transformed from nervous teenager to confident operative. "Just a very unfortunate case of mistaken identity on your part." Brad had stopped recording entirely, his face pale, as he began to understand that he had been documenting not a bullying incident but some kind of federal operation. "Dylan, man, I think we should get out of here. This is getting really weird." But it was too late for retreat. The sound of multiple vehicle engines filled the parking lot outside, and through the diner's windows, everyone could see black SUVs taking strategic positions around the building. These weren't local police vehicles. They were the kind of unmarked federal cars that appeared on the news during major arrests. Dylan spun toward the windows, his face a mask of terror. "No, no, no! This can't be happening! You're just a kid! You're nobody!" "I tried to warn you," Madison said, genuinely sounding sorry for him. "Multiple times, actually. But you wouldn't listen." The diner's front door burst open with a crash that sent the bell flying. 6 figures in tactical gear flooded in, their faces hidden behind visors, weapons drawn but pointed at the floor. The lead agent, a woman in her 40s with silver-streaked hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to absolute authority, approached Madison's table. "Director's daughter," the agent said, her voice carrying the respect due to someone connected to the highest levels of government. "Are you injured?" "Negative, Agent Morrison," Madison replied, slipping easily into official terminology. Subject exhibited escalating aggressive behavior as predicted, but remained within acceptable parameters for intelligence gathering. If this story has shown you the importance of never judging someone by their appearance, please hit that like button to show your support. Share this video with anyone who needs to know that justice can come from the most unexpected places. And don't forget to subscribe to follow more amazing stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when the moment demands it. Dylan stood frozen in the center of the diner, surrounded by federal agents who treated the teenager he'd been bullying as if she were their superior officer. The cognitive dissonance was so complete that he couldn't process what was happening. "Madison Taylor," he whispered, using her name for the first time. "Who are you, really?" The lead agent answered for her. "That's classified information, son. But what's not classified is that you just assaulted a federal protected person while being recorded by multiple surveillance systems. She gestured toward the corners of the diner, where Madison now noticed small cameras that hadn't been there during previous visits. The entire confrontation had been monitored and recorded by federal equipment, turning the restaurant into an impromptu surveillance operation. Dylan Pierce, Agent Morrison continued, approaching him with handcuffs already in hand. You're under arrest for assault on a federal protected person, destruction of government property, and conspiracy to interfere with an ongoing federal investigation. Investigation? Dylan's voice was barely audible. What investigation? Madison stood up, her posture now unmistakably that of someone with authority far beyond her apparent age. The investigation into your father's money laundering operation and his collaboration with foreign agents, seeking to influence local government decisions. You've been under surveillance for 6 months, Dylan. Tonight was just the final documentation phase. The handcuffs clicked around Dylan's wrists with a sound that seemed to echo through the stunned diner. Mrs. Patterson stood behind her counter with tears streaming down her face, not from fear, but from relief that someone had finally stood up to the Pierce family's reign of terror. "My father will destroy you for this," Dylan said, but his words lacked any conviction. "He'll have you all fired." Agent Morrison smiled grimly. "Your father was arrested 20 minutes ago at his home. This operation has been planned for months, Mr. Pierce." The convoy disappeared into the night. Madison sat back down and called her mother. "Mission accomplished, Mom. Target took the bait exactly as predicted. The Pierce network is neutralized." "Outstanding work, Agent 7. A voicemail from an unknown number played in her earpiece. "Your next assignment is ready. Report to the safe house tomorrow for briefing on Operation Classroom." Madison gathered her things and walked toward the exit. Outside, a black sedan waited. She slid inside and glanced back at the diner one last time. "So," she said to the federal marshal behind the wheel, "looks like dinner break is over."